Hey, everybody, good evening and welcome to Living Manna Church. I'm Pastor Dave, Senior Shepherd here at LMC. You are part of our Wednesday night LMC Bible study. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We got a really neat Bible study for you. We're just starting a brand new series in the book of Romans. I've got no idea how long this is actually going to take, but it's a big book, lots and lots of information. We're going to do it as a commentary, as a teaching. We're just going to go line by line, verse by verse, go right through the book, which is going to send us all over the place. But before we do that, again, just welcome to everybody that's joining us on Facebook. Give us a thumbs up, give us a like. If you're joining us on YouTube, do the same thing. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, so you can get information about when we go live. Certainly, give us a comment. Let us know where you're watching from, what state or a place that you're watching from, and just give us a shout out. Let us know who you are. Again, thank you so much for being part of our study tonight. Let's open up with a word of prayer, and then we'll just jump right into the study. Father, we love you. We thank you for this opportunity to open up your word tonight. We pray that you would open up our eyes and our understanding, Father, to receive the word of God. In Yeshua's name, amen. Amen. Okay, guys, let's just jump right into tonight's Bible study is actually part two. We did the introduction last week, so this is really the first actual study. But we're listing it for the playlist. It's going to be Romans part two, and the subtitle for tonight is "To the Jew First." To the Jew first. And it's the very same verse that we used last week as our introduction. This comes from the book of Romans, chapter 1 and verse 16, where the apostle says the following. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Messiah, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes, for the Jew first and also for the Greek. And Greek, you can substitute that word in there for Greek as Gentile. Same meaning, same idea, same concept. So let's do just a little bit of review, if we could, just about the introduction that we kind of already went through concerning Shaul. Now, I'm going to call him Shaul. Sometimes we'll call him Paul. His name was Shaul. That he is a Pharisee, and later on he gets adopted, or he is adopted by a Roman citizen. That is why he has the name Paul. His name does not change. I've heard, many say this, or I've heard preachers and teachers say this, that just like, let's say, Israel, that Jacob had his name changed to Israel with his experience of the Lord. That was not what happened with the apostle Paul. His name was Shaul, but his name was changed because of his Roman citizenship to Paul, taking on the name of the family member or the name of the family of the one who adopted him. So that's really the reason for the name change. And maybe we'll take a look at that a little bit later on in the study. But just by way of a little bit of review, Paul, Shaul, is a Pharisee. This is real important to realize. He is a Pharisee. He is part of a sect of Pharisees. And there are many different sects, just like there are different denominations today within Christendom. There were different sects of Pharisees. And in Paul's particular sect, these Pharisees believed in the resurrection. I think pretty much across the board, all Pharisaic orders believed in the resurrection. And he was part of Pharisaic Judaism. So it is the belief in the resurrection, and also within his particular sect, he also was part of a sect that believed that the Gentiles could come into faith. Now, the actual Pharisaic belief is very, very different from what Paul's going to teach eventually. But not everyone, not all of the Pharisees, and certainly not the Sadducees, they didn't like the idea of Gentiles coming in. We'll discuss that in just a little bit. Shaul was a well-educated person. He was from Tarsus, the center of the educational system within the Gentile world. So he had a pretty rounded education. He spoke multiple languages. He spoke multiple tongues because of all of the different cultures that were around him. And of course, he studied under the man Gamaliel, and through Gamaliel enters into Pharisaic Judaism of the first century. Now, there's some really important concepts that we've got to understand before we even, jump into the actual study or start reading the book. We've got to understand what's going on culturally in the world at this time. And this had actually been going on for quite some time, but culturally, there was a deep hatred between Jews and Gentiles. And it went both ways. The Jews despised Gentiles, and the Gentiles, the Romans, the Greeks, they despised the Jews. There was no love lost between the two groups. And even those Gentiles who, because there were some Pharisaic orders that did believe Gentiles could come and be part of the faith of Yah, it was very, very difficult for that to happen. The Gentile would have to go through a whole bunch of things, a halakha, rules and laws and regulations that were made up of a way, a procedure that a Gentile had to do in order to become a man or to be accepted in the family of faith. And of course, this halakha, these rules and laws that they had to go through, ended with circumcision, the physical circumcision, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, definitely throughout the study. I don't know if we're going to get to it today, but we'll talk about circumcision. But it ended with circumcision. But even after all that occurred, the Gentiles were not really looked at. The Gentiles who were proselytes, who actually, quote unquote, came into faith, were not really accepted as equals among the Jews. Remember, they were only allowed in a certain part of the temple, that outside court, the court of the Gentiles. They were never allowed to come in. A priest would have to go and present their offerings to them, for them. This was, so that there was definitely a dual citizenship, if you would. A lot of prejudice going on in the first century and beyond. And again, this went both ways. The Romans hated the Jews. They did everything they could to wipe them out, to get rid of them. Eventually to rename the city, scatter them everywhere. So this love loss, and this has a lot to do later on with how the quote-unquote church matures once it becomes a Gentile group, because the same animosities that were here that we're going to read about for the first believers winds up having an effect on what happens by the second and third century, once the Gentiles outnumber the actual Jews as part of the congregation, as part of the assembly of God. So you have to understand that deep cultural division, because Shaul is going to talk a lot about it. It's very, very important to the messages that Paul writes about. Now, Shaul, why pick him? And we spent a little time talking about this last week. But why pick this Pharisee, this very, very well-educated, well-rounded Pharisee, but he's part of Judaism. He's part of Pharisaical Judaism. Of all the things Yeshua said, don't do what they do. However, Yah picks him because, number one, he has a zeal for the Lord. He truly, truly does love the Lord, though misguided. But this man could understand and become the bridge for both worlds. He could understand and relate to everyone in Pharisaical Judaism with all the rules and all the halakha and all the ma'asim and all of the different man-made traditions. He understood that. He could relate to it, but he could also relate to the Gentile. And what a better person to bridge both worlds and to share the truth that it's not about all of these halakhas. It's not about all the takanot and ma'asim, the man-made traditions, and yet bring the pagans who knew nothing of Torah, nothing of the Pharisaical order, yet bring them through his instruction into obedience to Torah. Because this is really, really important that you understand. Paul is not, and Yeshua, I guess this really goes back to the master, Yeshua is not validating Pharisaic Judaism as correct. In fact, he does exactly the opposite. But neither did Yeshua come to start a brand new religion called Christianity, certainly the way we understand it today. Neither one of those is what Yeshua did. Neither one of those is what Paul taught. And so he really becomes this centerpiece in between two worlds. And so we've got to find where that middle is, where there is the understanding of the Torah, but not the traditions and the Pharisaic Judaism of the first century. And this is the man to do it. This is the man that Yah tapped on, blinded, took off the scales, and called him to be an ambassador, an emissary, a sent one to both the house of Israel, the Jew, and to the Gentile nations. So, and of course, he doesn't just go right out and begin ministering. He takes about 3 years off in Arabia at Sinai to learn, because he had to learn all over again too. Obviously, he knew his Torah. He knew a whole lot. There's a reason why it is to the Jew first, and we're going to talk more about that in just a little bit. But there is definitely a reason why it is that way, and yet he still needed to relearn a lot. There was a lot of information that we would call the mysteries of the kingdom. Those things, though they were there, not yet fully understood until you understand who Messiah is. Then all of a sudden, those mysteries begin to come to light. Once you understand that Yeshua is, in fact, the very topic of the entire Torah, the entire Tanakh, all of the writings, and this is what Shaul had to learn. And after he learns it, then he goes out and begins his ministry and really helps to turn the world upside down for the master. So that's just by way of a little introduction as to kind of what we covered last week. Certainly go back and listen to the introduction, a lot more detail there than I can go over here, because I really want to get into some interesting pieces of information. Now, in order to truly understand Romans. And guys, I've got the notes up here. They're also available online if you guys want to download them. I know you're probably watching it right on the YouTube or Facebook, but you can also download them if you want your own copy of these. But to truly understand this book, because this is really a very, very, I'm going to say difficult book to understand, but a book that is very often misunderstood. And yet it is pivotal. It is pivotal to really getting a grip on what our faith is truly about. Now, what this book is going to reveal to us as we go through it, we're going to get an opportunity to truly understand what salvation really means. And we touched on this, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. I don't know, I guess it was a Bible study maybe, where we talked about the word salvation and how it is deliverance and where it comes from. We're going to go back to that. We're going to take a much, much deeper look at that. But you're going to realize that in order to truly understand what salvation is, you must understand the book of Romans. And most today do not fully understand what that concept means. We're going to talk about circumcision, as I said, another very, very misunderstood concept, even among the Hebrew roots preachers and teachers that I've heard, some that I greatly, greatly respect, good teachers, know their stuff, have done some wonderful teachings, helped me. I learned a lot from them. But when it comes to truly understanding what circumcision is about, and whether it is for us today or not, we're going to see what Rabbi Shaul actually says about that. So that's going to be very interesting when we get there. We're going to learn about grace, what grace actually and truly means, as opposed to the way that it is portrayed or it is taught today taught to people today, the way that it is believed today. Very, very different concept. Of course, we are going to not just stay in the book of Romans. It's impossible for us to do that, because if you're going to truly understand what the book of Romans is about, you have to go back to the Torah. You've got to go back to the prophets. You got to go back to the Psalms. And you're going to see that Shaul quotes from all of these passages, not haphazardly. He's not just pulling out verses because they sound good or that they fit an idea that he wants to get across. He pulls them out because the ideas, the way they were originally written, have application to who we are. He's teaching us the mysteries of the kingdom, from what was to absolutely to what is. So not only are we going to look at from the Torah to the Psalms, but we are also going to look at the other books of Shaul, because you have to understand, these are letters. And, when he wrote a letter to a particular congregation, he didn't deal with every theological issue in one letter. He would deal with maybe an issue that was going on in that congregation, give a general understanding. Maybe they were dealing with circumcision or marriage or what have you. And so the content of that letter would be on those issues. Well, the congregations would share letters because he would write another letter to another congregation, sometimes dealing with similar issues, but other times dealing with something he never dealt with, or it was, we can assume that the first congregation already knew this stuff and didn't need further teaching on it, but the next congregation did. And so all of the letters, Galatians, Ephesians, Colossians, and so forth and so on, we're going to look through all of them. All of those pieces of the puzzle need to come together in order to understand any one of the books, but certainly to understand the book of Romans. And so we're going to piece the different pieces of put the different pieces of information together and get a real rounded picture of what this story of the gospel is truly about. And most importantly, guys, remember this. This will really help guide us as we go through this. The parable that the master taught about the kingdom scribes, that the kingdom of God is like a scribe who brings out of his household. He's taking care of the master's household, but brings out of his household both things old and things new. And of course, what that parable is all about is that Yeshua came to tell us about the mysteries of the kingdom that are considered new wine, but not new as though they are brand new, new understandings to things that were already written. Really, the true meaning of things that were already written that the prophets longed to look into, but nobody fully understood until Yeshua came and gave insight into all of those things. Well, the scribe, Paul, is one of the first, really, with the apostles, a scribe of the kingdom, who is going to put together the old, what was understood, and the new, what is now understood in Yeshua. He's going to reveal to us the mysteries of the kingdom, even beyond some of the things that we read in Matthew 13 and some of the other Gospels about the kingdom. So some really, really interesting topics we're going to go through as we get into this book. So keep these things in mind. And with that, let's just jump right into this, okay? Chapter 1 of the book of Romans. And of course, we are using the Scriptures version. I did, for a couple of different verses, I put in some of the King James because it just says things a little bit, I think, more to our cultural understanding. So, but I'll let you know when we do that. But here is the book of Romans, chapter 1 and verse 1. So let's just read through. It says, Shaul, a servant of Yeshua Messiah, a called emissary, a sent one, separated to the good news of Elohim, which he promised before through his prophets in the set-apart scriptures. Every time you see the word set apart, it's holy. Concerning his son, who came of the seed of David according to the flesh, who was designated Son of Elohim with power according to the set-apart Spirit by the resurrection from the dead. Yeshua, Messiah, the Master of us, through whom we have received favor and office of the emissary, apostle, for belief, obedience among all the nations on behalf of his name, among whom you also are the called ones of Yeshua Messiah. To all who are in Rome, beloved of Elohim, called, set apart ones, favor to you and peace from Elohim our Father and the Master, Yeshua Messiah. Now you notice I highlighted a couple of things there that in the blue there or in the green, by the resurrection from the dead. We're going to deal with that in a second. And also that little piece in the red that says for belief, obedience among all nations on behalf of his name. Well, reason I highlight that, and I'm going to give it to you in actually also in the uh, in the King James in just a second. But out of those first couple of verses, just his little introduction, three really important items we need to be aware of as we begin to look at this book. Number one, he is writing to a synagogue in Rome. We would say a congregation, but it's a synagogue that he is writing to. And the audience that he is writing to are Jews and what we would say former Gentiles, or what would be called proselytes by the Pharisees, but now they have come to the understanding of who Yeshua is, and Paul is giving them some more information. Now, this is important because Rome was kind of tricky in the days following the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. Acts chapter 1 and verse 8. Listen to what it says. Now, this is the actual everybody coming to Jerusalem. This is the time when the Holy Spirit's about to fall, and it tells us that men they saw, they heard the apostles speaking in these languages. They listened to Peter's message. These men heard who Yeshua was. It tells us 3,000 come to repentance and get water baptized one day, 5,000 another day. All of these men had come from all over the world, including Rome. Acts chapter 1, verse 8, it says, and after this, it's I think I have the wrong verse there. I think it's 1:8. It's actually Acts 18. I can't even read my own typing there. Acts chapter 18, it says, and after this, Shaul left Athens and went to Corinth. And he found a certain Jew, Yehudi, named Aquilus, born in Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all the Jews to leave Rome, and he came to them. So Paul winds up meeting Aquila and Priscilla at Corinth in Athens, after Athens. But notice it says that the Roman emperor Claudius kicked the Jews out of Rome. This is a very, very important part, and it gives us a little window into the history. Now, when does he actually do that? He does that in AD 41, just after the outpouring of the Spirit upon all of those believers in Jerusalem. So what winds up happening is all of these people go back to their synagogues, back to Rome and back to other places, and begin sharing the experiences that they had at Jerusalem with the apostles. And this doesn't always sit very well, or didn't sit very well in the synagogues. And there was contention between Jew to Jew and Jew to proselyte in Rome, to the point, fighting to the point. Again, remember, the Gentiles didn't like the Jews to begin with, especially in Rome, that Claudius actually kicks all of the Jews out of Rome for a time and a season. But by the time Paul is writing this letter, many have gone back to Rome. And so the synagogues are being opened up again. This gospel message that's caused all of this problem, all of this stirring, this different message that the people in the synagogues had never heard, now it's starting to take hold. So that's where the letter comes in. And this just gives you a little bit of a window to see what was going on historically. Number two, I want you to realize that it told us that the resurrection, if you remember just a couple of weeks ago, or not even that long ago, we talked about the cornerstone. That's actually this past weekend on First Fruits. We talked about the cornerstone, that the resurrection is the actual cornerstone. And remember what we just took a look at, and let me see if I can put it back up there. It says he was the son of David according to the flesh, who was designated son of Elohim in power according to the set-apart Spirit by the resurrection of the dead. That's it. That is the highlight, the most important issue. And again, we've already kind of talked about the cornerstone, but this is the issue that for both Pharisee and the Gentiles coming in, this is what makes Messiah different. This changes the entire story. Acts chapter 23 and verse 6, this belief in the resurrection. Remember, that is a Pharisaical belief. Shaul actually uses this later on in a trial when he's standing before the Sanhedrin made up of both Sadducees and Pharisees. 23 and verse 6 says, Now Shaul, perceiving that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, cried out in the council, Men, brothers, I am a Pharisee. So what was Paul? Even still later, he still called himself a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. I am being judged concerning the expectation and resurrection of the dead. Now, two real important points here. As he's giving this little testimony, because he's realizing how to get these guys on my side, if they realize I'm on trial here for the resurrection, because then they would all be like, yeah, there is a resurrection, and vote against the Pharisees. So that's the one thing. But he says, I'm also here concerning the expectation. What expectation? The kingdom. And it is important for us to remember that is the biblical expectation. The expectation wasn't to go to heaven to be with the Lord. The expectation has always been to be in a real physical kingdom here on the earth through resurrection with the Messiah as the king in Jerusalem. That is the expectation. So, and we're going to talk more about this. It's going to come up again and again. And it's so important that we realize this. This was the goal through resurrection to attain the kingdom. And of course, he adds the resurrection of the dead. This is our faith, or this is the faith of the day, the faith of the Torah is resurrection, but it is to reach the kingdom. Why is that so important? Third part, or the third important thing is this. What is the faith? Now, let me go back just a little bit, because I want you to see it the way that it is actually worded in the scriptures version. It's the part that is in red there. It says, for belief, obedience among all the nations on behalf of his name. The King James Version says something like, for the faith preached among all the nations in his name. Well, here it says belief, but same word, faith. Well, what is the actual faith? Well, we just saw it there in the book of Acts as he's standing before the Sanhedrin. The faith is to believe in the kingdom, the coming Messiah who will reign, and resurrection. That's the faith. And here, verse 5 is the way that it says it in the King James. I read it on the notes there. It says, through whom we have received favor and office of the emissary for belief/obedience among all the nations on behalf of his name. That's the scriptures version. Right underneath it is the actual King James Version. Listen to how it says it. By whom we have received grace and apostleship for obedience to the faith among all nations for his name. So we are to be obedient to the faith. The question then is, what faith is he talking about? Well, again, we just saw in Acts, the faith is the belief, yes, obviously in Yeshua, but the belief that there is a kingdom to come. That's the destination. Again, he has not come for Pharisaic Judaism, nor has he come to to start a new religion called Christianity, though many people use Paul for those purposes. This idea of the faith to come is also found in the book of Jude, chapter 1. Now, this is the King James Version, and it says the following. Beloved, when I gave all diligence to write unto you of the common salvation, it was needful for me to write unto you and exhort you that you should earnestly contend for the faith which was once delivered unto the saints. What faith is he talking about? The same one the apostle is talking about, that's saying that it is by faith among all the nations to be preached in his name. The faith is the belief that there is a kingdom coming, a Messiah coming, and a resurrection. Well, what saints is Jude actually referring to? Well, Malachi chapter 4 and verse 6 gives us insight into that. This is talking about Elijah to come before the great and terrible day of the Lord. And it says, "And he shall turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to the fathers, to return them to the faith of the fathers." What was the faith of the fathers? Of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob? A land, a kingdom, a city, a coming Messiah, and resurrection. This was the faith given to Abraham. So, guys, this is not new. This is not what Paul is presenting here. Like I said, it's not Pharisaical Judaism, but it is also not the way we today, as a modern Christian culture, view what the faith is. The faith at its core is what was told to Abraham, told to Isaac, told to Jacob, given to us in detail through Moses. That is the faith. The coming of Messiah does not change any of that. It is the answer to all of that, which again is very, very different from the way it's portrayed in a large part of the religious world today. So with that in mind, then, Shaul's examples he's going to throughout the book of Romans and some of the other books, he's going to bring us right back to the story of Abraham. Why? Because Abraham is where the faith starts. So with that, let's take a look. The next verse is verse 7 in the book of Romans. And so the introduction is kind of done. Verse 7, it says, "To all who are in Rome, beloved of Elohim, called, set apart ones." Notice he keeps calling us called. Remember, many are called, few are chosen. You don't just want to be the called ones, you want to be the chosen ones. But it's kind of interesting how he keeps putting that out there. You're called. God is calling you. He's trying to get your attention. Set apart ones. Favor to you and peace from Elohim, our Father, and the Master Yeshua Messiah. First, I truly thank my Elohim through Yeshua Messiah for you all, that your belief is spoken of in all the world. For Elohim is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the good news of his Son. So when a lot of the Jews get kicked out of Rome for all this new information that comes from Jerusalem after the day of Shavuot, the proselytes, the Gentiles, are allowed to stay. Now, many, many years later, they come back, and faith has blossomed both among the Gentiles and the returning Jews in these synagogues. And Rabbi Shaul is saying, we've heard about you guys. We've heard about your faith. It says in verse 9, "For Elohim is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the good news of his Son. How unceasingly I make mention of you always, asking in my prayers, if at all possible I shall be blessed by the desire of Elohim to come to you. For I long to see you, so as to impart some spiritual gift to you, for you to be established, and that is, to be encouraged together among you, each by the other's belief, both yours and mine. And I do not wish you to be unaware, brothers, that I often purposed to come to you, but was hindered until now, in order to have some fruit among you, as also among the other Gentiles or other nations." So again, he's really kind of the continuation of the introduction. We love you. We heard all about you. I really, really wanted to get there to see you guys. But finally, here's a letter. Let's encourage each other. I want to encourage your faith. I want you to encourage mine. Verse 14, and this is real important. "I am a debtor both to Greeks and to foreigners, both to wise and to foolish. That is why I am so eager to bring the good news also to you who are in Rome." So we know for sure that in this audience of people that he is writing to in this book, there are what would be called foreigners, strangers, Gentiles. We're going to find out in just a little bit that there absolutely are Jews there as well, probably even predominantly Jews. But Both of these groups of people are absolutely there, which is very important to understanding the book as to why he words it the way he does, why he gives the different comparisons the way he does, because he's talking to both groups who remember culturally outside of the synagogue, in just the Jewish world and the Gentile world, they would be at each other's throats. They dislike each other. You can't even go under a Gentile's roof. So these people were probably formerly proselytes that have now come to faith, or perhaps even just Gentiles who have come into faith. So this is a very, very new thing, and Paul is trying to give them the proper information on how this is actually supposed to work. Imagine the animosity, imagine the hardship that these people would be going through from both of their groups, from the Jewish world for those Jews that are in that synagogue, and from the Gentile world for the families of those who now their own family members are now part of this synagogue, part of this people of the way, and just a physical animosity that went on there. Just imagine the hardship that they must have gone through. I guess we can relate to it a little bit as we walk more and more in accordance with Yah's word. We get the same kind of response from family members and friends, and why are you doing that? Are you this? Are you that? And so imagine that 100-fold with the pressures of everyday life all around them. That's who he is writing to. Verse 16, and here it is. This kind of sets the table for what we're going to really talk about for tonight. So really his introduction is done, and he just left us off with this, okay, I'm acknowledging that Yah has called me to the Gentiles and to the foreigners. Verse 16, for I am not ashamed of the good news of Messiah, for it is the power of Elohim for deliverance to everyone who believes, to the Jew, the Yehudi first, and also to the Greek, to the Gentile. Guys, this is a huge statement. This is paramount. This sets the table for everything else that's going to go on in the book. He's just addressed the Gentiles. He's just said, I'm an emissary to you. I've heard of your faith. I hear what's going on. I've come. I want to share. I want to encourage you. But I'm not ashamed of this good news. Why would he be ashamed? Because of the animosity that there is within the world between Jew and Gentile. So there's this unique thing going on in the people of the way that is not part of the other world outside of them. And yet Paul gives us an order here, saying, I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Messiah. It is the power for salvation to everyone. Guys, that statement would upset the people at the temple, to everyone who believes. But then he puts an order on it, and you think, well, doesn't that kind of start more trouble? No, he's being scriptural here. To the Jew first, but also to the Gentile. So he's not making them second-class citizens, but he's laying down an order of what Yah has done. And that order is very, very important to understanding the rest of the book of Romans. Now, to the Jew first. And that's the title of what we're doing today. To the Jew first, and then also to the Greek. When we say the house of Israel, as you read it in the scripture, there's a portion, I believe, in Matthew 10, where Yeshua says, go only to the 12, go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. When we say Israel in a first century framework, it's speaking of Judah. Judah, the people of Judah, which are Judah, the tribe of Judah, also the tribe of Levi, or some of them are there, and also the tribe of Benjamin. Those are the three tribes that actually make up the land of Judah. However, there are remnant peoples from all the other tribes that are also part of Judah. All of them from all the other tribes, and also Judah, Levi, and Benjamin, they are of the house of Israel. Even though Judah becomes its own kingdom and it was separate from the northern house, they're still citizens, they're still sheep from the whole house of Israel before it was divided. Now, collectively, the people of Judah are called Jews, or you see Yehudi. And of course that refers to the land of Judah in which they live. So when you see the term Israel, he's the king of Israel, or don't go, I'm only here for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, he is speaking specifically to the people of Judah of that day. They are the Israel of that day. They are not the northern house, that Israel, but they are still part of the house of Israel. It's really important to understand this, though they are called Jews. So there is no northern kingdom by this time. There is only Judah. But Judah also is from the house of Israel. Ephraim, of course, is scattered. Ephraim has been scattered. Now, again, are there remnant people from Ephraim that live in Judah? Absolutely. We know at the birth of Messiah, there's someone from the tribe of Simeon and another person from another tribe that are there. I believe Asher, that are there when Yeshua is presented at the temple. They're not natives to Judah, but they were living in Judah, and since they lived in Judah, and they probably had moved there to get away from the Assyrian captivity, they became part of Judah. But they represent all of the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But remember, the northern house had been scattered by this time. By the first century, over 600 years, the northern house had already been scattered amongst the Gentiles, living amongst the Gentiles, becoming, or really by this time, became the Gentiles. Now, there were pockets and groups of them that didn't assimilate, and they knew where they were, and they're also mentioned in the New Testament as well. But when we say Ephraim, that's kind of the concept. They've been gone for almost 600 years. Now, Yeshua came to Judah first. You know, why not come during the reign of King Solomon when there is a northern house and there is actually there's no northern and southern house, when there's just one whole kingdom? Why didn't Yeshua come then? It was not the right time. Remember, the scripture says at the appointed time, at the fullness of time, Messiah came. Things had to be a certain way. History had to play itself out for Messiah to come, so that when he comes to the Jew first. There is no northern house. It's done. And all the people in Judah, or the Israel of that day, are called Jews. Zechariah chapter 10 and verse 3. Here's a prophecy about this very issue. This is about the one who's going to come, the Messiah, the cornerstone, actually. Chapter 10 and verse 3, it says, "My wrath burns against the shepherds, and I lay a charge against the leaders." Isn't that what Yeshua did when he came? The whole parable of the vineyard. They didn't bring fruit. They killed the son when he came. Yeshua says, "What are you going to do to those people? We're going to wipe them out. They should be miserably wiped out." Yeshua says, "I'm talking about you. The kingdom's going to be taken away from you. Woe to you, Pharisees. Woe to you, scribes." His wrath burned against the shepherds. This is a prophecy of that very issue. His wrath burned against the shepherds, and he laid a charge against the leaders. "For Yehovah of hosts shall visit his flock, the house of Judah, and make them like his splendid horse in battle." This is telling us when the Messiah comes, who will he come to? Not to the northern house. This is telling us he will come to the southern kingdom. He will come to the house of Judah. And of course, we know just history, that's exactly what Yeshua did. So just even by the numbers game, did he come to the Jew first? Absolutely. And that is part of what Rabbi Shaul is talking about. There was an order to these things. But why, how? That's also very important information. Why Judah? Why would Yah make it so that there would be no northern house, that they would be scattered already, but that Judah, because don't forget, Judah also gets scattered, or they get sent to Babylon, and they're there for 70 years, and yet Yah brings them back from Babylon. Why? Because that prophecy that would later be written by Zechariah tells us when the Messiah comes, he's coming to Judah. The whole riding in on a donkey thing, which is also very, very pertinent to what we're about to read. So why Judah? I guess before we explain Judah, let's explain a little bit about Ephraim. Why not Ephraim? Why is Ephraim scattered? Why isn't he part of this whole process? Ephraim, like I said, is scattered. Thus, the parable of the sower. Why does Yeshua say the parable of the sower is a mystery? Because there's no other real information given to us on how Yah is going to get the scattered house of Ephraim back. Well, the mystery of the kingdom is he's going to do it. He's going to send seed out. So that's part of it. But here is the core. Here's the purpose or the genius behind all of this. Genesis chapter 48 and verse 19. Again, we got to go all the way back to the beginning. Here is a prophecy that Jacob is speaking over his sons, and he's prophesying about each one of them, what they will become. Not just them, the peoples that will come from them, what we would later on know to be the 12 tribes of the house of Israel. And listen to what he says about Ephraim. This is when Jacob crosses his hands over Ephraim and Manasseh to bless them, and Joseph kind of tries to correct him, but Jacob says, no, I know what I'm doing, and this is what he says in verse 19. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also becomes a people, and he also is great. He's speaking about Manasseh. And yet his younger brother, Ephraim, is greater than he, and his seed is to become the completeness or the fullness of the nations, or better yet, the fullness of the Gentiles. Jacob prophesies over Ephraim that he will become greater than even his other brother. And it winds up, when you go through history, as you read through the scripture, eventually Ephraim becomes the largest tribe in the northern kingdom. And the whole northern kingdom winds up becoming known of as Ephraim. Just like the people of Judah, though they are 3 different tribes, became known as Judah, not just Benjamin or not Levi. Similarly, the same thing happened to the northern kingdom. The 10 tribes were collectively known by the strongest and biggest tribe there as the house of Ephraim, or the northern kingdom, or just Ephraim, my son. So here's the prophecy that tells us, what will Ephraim become? He's going to become many nations, the fullness of the Gentiles. Well, what happens to the people that are under the banner of Ephraim? They get scattered. Scattered where? Among the Gentiles. They have become a multitude of nations, assimilated into multiple peoples. Exactly what the prophecy given by Jacob said would happen. And that term, that Ephraim would become the fullness of the Gentiles, is going to become very, very important by the time we get to Romans chapter 11. This is going to come back up, this idea of the Gentiles, or the fullness of the Gentiles. So when we say Gentiles, we're talking about Ephraim. We're talking about the mixed peoples into all of the nations. That's who Ephraim is, and here's a prophecy about it. But why Judah? Why would Zechariah say that he's coming to Judah? Why the Jew first? Why not Ephraim first? Well, Judah in chapter 49, it's not Judah, to Judah. This is Jacob speaking over his son Judah. And listen to this prophecy. This is an absolutely amazing, amazing prophecy. It says to Judah that you are a lion's cub. From the prey you have gone up, my son. He bowed down. He crouched like a lion. And like a lion, who does rouse him? The scepter shall not turn aside from Judah, nor an inscriber from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him is the obedience of the peoples, binding his donkey to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine and his robes in the blood of grapes. This is a prophecy of why it is to the Jew first. Why Yah, though he sends them to Babylon for 70 years, allows them to come back to Judah. Though they were the Babylonian harlot, he allows them to come back. There's a remnant that are good, that are true, but he allows the nation to come back, and it goes even further south, and yet the master decides to come to Judah because of this prophecy, or not just because of this prophecy, but a big part about it is this prophecy. Now let's read it again, but let's read it with the little inscriptions that I put in there. Verse 10. It says the scepter, the ruling, the rod, the authority, the kingship will not turn aside from Judah. Messiah comes from which tribe? Judah. He is the scepter. He is the rod. Nor an inscriber or a scribe or a Torah teacher, nor will a Torah teacher from between his feet. So what is Judah going to bring us? Judah is going to bring us a king and a scepter, and Judah is going to bring us a Torah teacher. Well, who is the king that is the Torah teacher? That is none other than Yeshua Messiah himself. And then what does he do? He teaches it to his emissaries. He teaches it to Judah. The mysteries of the kingdom are taught to Judah first, to the Jew first. Nor a Torah teacher from between his feet. Until when? Until Shiloh comes. The word Shiloh means the bringer of peace. Again, who is that? Yeshua Messiah, the Prince of Peace. And to him, to this one who is the Torah teacher, the one who is the scepter, to him will come the obedience of all peoples through God's Torah. And actually, it tells us exactly how through. How? By binding his donkey to the vine. Zechariah 9. He came, your king, the scepter, comes riding to you lowly on a colt, the foal of a donkey. That's a second prophecy confirming this prophecy. His binding his donkey to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he washed his garments. Well, what did Yeshua do? He came as the son of David, the king. He came as a Torah teacher. He came to bring the words of peace. He is the Shiloh. He came riding in on a donkey. He is the choice vine, and his robes and his garments were dipped in wine, and his robes from the blood of grapes, the sacrifice. He gives himself as a sacrifice. And where does all of this happen? In Judah. So to the Jew first has tremendous prophetic ramifications. This is how Yah designed it, that of all 12 of the tribes, and each one's got their own prophecy of what they would do, but the northern house would be scattered to the nations. How to get to the northern house would be through Judah, who would be first to hear the mysteries of the kingdom, first to see Shiloh come on a donkey, first to see his sacrifice, the resurrection, and be given the mysteries of the kingdom, to then become the emissaries, to become the sent ones, to become the apostles, because that's what apostle means. It means a sent one. So here's the thing. What is an apostle, or who are the apostles? To the Jew first. Those are the people that were chosen to take this message and to get it out to the entire world. Now think about this. The entire house of Israel was chosen to do the same thing. I believe it's Deuteronomy chapter 4, where God instructs the house of Israel, the whole house of Israel, to be witnesses to the nations. Well, they didn't do such a hot job of that. As history goes on, we know that they more assimilated with the nations. But Yah's word doesn't come back void. He's going to have accomplished everything he said that would happen. And he did. He did it through Judah, to the Jew first. It had to be Judah. It had to be Jerusalem first. The book of Acts, chapter 1 and verse 6. This is after the resurrection, after his garments are dipped in the blood of the grape. Yeshua is about, this is during the counting of the Omer. Here we are in the counting of the Omer. We're in the just begun the counting of the Omer. This is 40 days into the counting of the Omer. And look at what Yeshua says to them. So when they had come together, they asked him, saying, Master, would you at this time restore the reign of Israel, or reign to Israel, or the kingdom to Israel? Remember, guys, what is the hope? What is the faith? The faith of our forefathers to restore the kingdom to Israel. That was the hope through resurrection, to be a real literal king, to have a physical body here on this earth. That is what the promise is. So you see it again here. And Yeshua doesn't tell them, you guys are wrong. No, you're supposed to go to heaven and you're going to be with me on a cloud or any of that stuff. No, he doesn't say that. That was what the belief was and still is today. At least that's what it should be today. We've kind of changed it and morphed it and done all sorts of other things to it. But here it is. Are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel? Verse 7, look at the master's response. And he said to them, it is not for you to know the times or the seasons which the Father has put in his own authority. So it's going to happen. The thing you're looking forward to, the hope is going to happen, but I'm not going to tell you when. It's going to be in the Father's timing. So he doesn't rebuke them. He doesn't say, no, you guys got it all wrong. That's not what we're here to do. Something totally different is going to happen. We're going to start a brand new religion. Everything else is going to... That's not what he says. Everything that had already been taught and understood, the old needs to be understood now, the mysteries of how to get the old done. But the promises are the same. Verse 8, but you shall receive power when the set-apart Spirit has come upon you, and you shall be my witnesses. Who? Who are his witnesses? To the Jew first. Every one of the apostles were Jews. All of them. Shaul was a Jew, maybe from the tribe of Benjamin, but still a Jew from Judah. This was the plan of Yah, to use Judah first, to take a remnant out of Judah, to take a group of people who would believe the truth and use them to speak to Judah, to speak to the rest of the world. And he goes on to tell us, you shall be my witnesses where? In Jerusalem first, and in Judah, span out, and then to Samaria, and then to the ends of the earth. The master is here only confirming what we just read not in Zechariah, in the book of Genesis, that he's come and he's come in on a donkey. He has taught the Torah. He's going to send this out, and he's going to be obeyed by the peoples. How is he going to do that? By sending out his emissaries to the Jew first. So really, really important principles here. Someone had to be the sent ones. Who were the sent ones? The sent one means apostle. Who were the sent ones? Jews. The Jews were the apostles. That's the gift that Ephesians is talking about. He gave some apostles. Who were the apostles? The Jews were the apostles. They were the ones with the information. They were the ones who received the new wine. They were the ones who knew the old wineskins. These were the emissaries. These were the apostles. That's a qualification. When people talk about apostles today, and people say, I'm an apostle, or you go back and you say, well, to be an apostle, you had to have been there to see Yeshua and to be part of his whole ministry. And yeah, that's all true. But there's another qualification that nobody even thinks of. They were all Jews, to the Jew first. Okay, so Daniel confirms this same concept, or the same idea of to the Jew first. Now, this is Daniel chapter 12. Let me give you just a little bit of background so you understand what's coming in. I put in a whole bunch of little highlights there to help us understand the story. In Daniel chapter 12, it is talking about the fourth beast of the four beasts in the statue that Nebuchadnezzar sees. That is Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and the last one is Rome. Now, here in Daniel 12, he's telling us what Rome would do, the kingdom of the north, what it would do. Daniel chapter 12 and verse 30. And strong ones shall arise from him, from the kingdom of the north, the Romans. The him is the beast body, the statue that Nebuchadnezzar sees. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and now the fourth one, the legs and the feet, or what will become the feet, Rome. This is the exact parallel to Revelation 13, except in Revelation 13, it says that a beast comes out of the sea that has the body of a lion, a bear, and a leopard. Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. But then after verse 11, it says another beast. And who can make war with that beast? That's the beast with the mark. That is Rome, the physical pagan kingdom of Rome. Rome. So let's read again. And strong one shall arise from him, from the beast body, and profane the set apart place, the temple, the stronghold, and shall take away that which is continual, the sacrifices, and set up the abomination that lays waste. When they destroyed the temple, the Romans eventually put a statue of Jupiter on the site where the temple used to stand, doing almost the same thing that the beast did under Greece when another statue of Zeus was put in that same area. Now Rome does the same thing. It sets up a statue to Jupiter. So it sets up the abomination that lays waste, an idol to Jupiter, and by flatteries, by good words, he shall, the beast, shall profane those who do wrong against the covenant. The priests, the Pharisees, who are all worried about what Rome will say and Rome will do and turn Messiah in and have him killed. But the people who know their Elohim shall be strong and shall act. Who's he talking about? The Jews, the Netzarim, the kingdom scribes, the disciples who listened to Yeshua, and those of the people who have insight, Shaul, the sent ones, the Jews, shall give understanding to many, both Jew and Gentile, to the Jew first, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the uttermost parts of the world. And they shall stumble by sword and flame, by captivity and plundering, for days. Persecution. What is the story of all the apostles from the beginning of the ministry on? Persecution everywhere they go. When we read through Paul, you're going to see that poor man went through literally just a living hell over the years of just going through all sorts of horrible tribulation, and yet never gives up. And when they stumble, they shall be helped, a little help, but many shall join them, first the Jew and also the Gentile. By flatteries, good words, by the gospel, many will join them. I am not ashamed of the gospel of Messiah, for it is the power of God unto salvation to the Jew first and also to the Gentile. And some of those who have insight shall stumble, suffer tribulation, death, to refine them, and to cleanse them, and to make them white until the time of the end, for it is still for an appointed time. This whole little portion here, again, as I say, this is a parallel to Revelation chapter 13, but this is telling us what happened in the first century and beyond, with Rome coming, with the deception of the priest, with the killing of Messiah, with the abomination of desolation, and the sending out of the sent ones, the people who have insight. And who are they? Well, this happens in Jerusalem. It is to the Jew first. So we've got multiple verses. And again, this just gives you another little window into the confirmation that the highlight event of history, within the biblical framework, is yes, the coming of Yeshua, but also the destruction of the temple, the setting up of this abomination by Rome, and then what happens after that is listed to us in Revelation 13, and we'll talk about that another day, the whole mark and all of that stuff, where it comes from and what it is and how it has reached us even till today. But this is amazing to me. I hope everybody gets this. If you get this part, this to me is just absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing. And yet it confirms that it is to the Jew first, and then to the Gentiles. So Shaul's not just he's not just pulling this out of a hat. This has biblical ramifications to it. Now, the Jew first. Acts chapter 2, going back to the story of the giving of the Spirit. This is on the day of Shavuot, the 50th day. It says, now in Jerusalem there were dwelling Jews. Well, of course, it's Shavuot. Dedicated men from every nation under the heaven. And don't forget, it is after this when these dedicated men who see and hear what they hear, speak to the apostles, all the stuff that goes on, they go back to where they were, including Rome, and they bring this message, and it causes such a confusion and division in Rome that Caesar kicks them out. Rome. The next verse, it says, if you listen, it tells us all the different people where they were from. It says, finally, after there's Scythians and Parthians and all the whole list of them, it says, visitors from Rome, both Jews and converts. So who came from Rome? Jews and proselytes. Who's Rabbi Shaul writing to right now? Jews and proselytes. Now remember, the proselytes were former Gentiles who have now, through Pharisaical Judaism, are being tolerated but not necessarily accepted as being part of the kingdom of Israel. They're not told to keep all the commandments. They're told that you have to keep the Noahide laws. You don't have all the same rights and privileges, but you're considered a righteous Gentile if you go through all the things that you've gone through. Well, these are the people that are there for Shavuot. So again, I'm just showing you, who does this go to first? To the Jew first. Of course, we know what Yeshua says to us about the proselytes and about the Pharisees who get them. Matthew chapter 23 and verse 15, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you go about the land and the sea to win one convert. They didn't go out and they didn't want thousands and thousands. They didn't like the Gentiles. But a few, some, go out and win that one convert, that proselyte, that Gentile. And when he is won, you make him a son of hell, a Gehenna, twofold more than yourselves. Not a good deal. So Pharisaical Judaism, even though they were bringing in these proselytes, were not truly making them part of the house of Israel, but according to what Yeshua says, making them twice as ripe for judgment as even the Pharisees were as well. So these are the people, and yet it is to the Jew first. And as Daniel tells us, he's going to pick people of insight, the called out ones, the apostles, to the Jew first. Okay, so with all of that, Matthew chapter 10, and this is the verse I kind of alluded to before, and I think I had a conversation with a dear sister today about this. She just happened to ask about this, and this was in my notes for today. Yeshua sends out the 12 apostles, the sent ones, those with insight, and listen to what he tells them. Matthew 10 and verse 5. It says, Yeshua sent these 12 out, having commanded them, saying, do not go into the way of the nations, the Gentiles, and do not enter a city of the Samaritans, but rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And by the house of Israel, guys, he means Judah. They are still the house of Israel. They're still one of the tribes, or three of the tribes. That's the people that he was ministering to. We think of house of Israel to mean Ephraim and Judah, but in this case, he is speaking specifically of what would have been considered by them of Israel of their day. They are the house of Israel. Now, the question to ask is, well, didn't Yeshua speak to Samaritans and Gentiles before? Yeah, absolutely he did. He spoke to the woman at the well and others. But in this case, when he is sending out the 12, he is fulfilling the prophecies, especially the one in Daniel. He's sending out those with insight. To who first? To Judah first. This is a fulfillment of prophecy. He's doing exactly what the Torah said to do, or what the prophecies had said the Messiah would do. He's sending out his emissaries, who are going to give insight to all peoples, but to the Jew first. By who? By the Jews, those with insight. So it's not that he's excluding the Gentiles, that they have no place, but in this particular instance, he's telling them, this is the mission, this is the prophecy, this is what we're here for, this is why my robes will be dipped in blood, and in the blood of the grape, riding in on a donkey. This is why, for the whole house of Israel, for the scattered sheep. He's actually, and this idea that they are the scattered sheep, that Judah in particular are the ones that he's being sent to. Again, it doesn't take away from Ephraim, but it fulfills some major prophecies. Yeshua speaking about this very concept, this very idea, in John chapter 10 and verse 14, listen to what Yeshua says. Now hopefully this will make sense to what we just read. He says, I am the good shepherd, and I know mine, and mine know me, even as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for those sheep. And other sheep I have. He's speaking about Ephraim and the Gentiles, which are not of this fold. Well, what fold is he in? He's in the fold of Judah. So I have other sheep, Gentiles, which are not of this fold, Judah. I have to bring them as well, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one flock, and here it is, one shepherd. So is he excluding in any way the northern house? Not at all, but he is fulfilling prophecy by letting us see that he is sending it out to Judah first, to the Jew first, to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, of the sheepfold that are there at that time. Yes, consisting of, peoples from other tribes that had moved there, but still it is Judah. Yeshua here is, in John chapter 10, he's actually referring to another prophecy. So guys, there's just like prophecy after prophecy after prophecy that's being fulfilled. So when he says that I have two sheepfolds, and there's going to only be one flock, eventually one flock and one shepherd, he is actually referring to Ezekiel and chapter 37. Let's take a look at that real quick. Just want to say hi to everybody that's joining us. Thanks for hanging out with us today, guys. I see you guys down there. Praise the Lord. Good to have you guys. All right. So Ephraim, fullness of the Gentiles. Remember, Ephraim was the fullness of the Gentiles, and then there's Judah. Well, here's what Yeshua was referring to in John chapter 10, Ezekiel 37 and verse 19. Thus says the Master Yehovah, see, I am taking the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim. Ephraim covered all of those tribes. And the tribes of Israel, his companions, all 10 tribes. And I shall give them unto him with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they shall be one in my hand. Now he's talking about sticks and trees, but take that word out for a second and put flock. I have a flock called Ephraim, scattered with all the 10 tribes, the Gentiles, and I have a flock called Judah. When Yeshua is speaking in John 10, the flock Judah is where he is. The other flock he's referring to is Ephraim, scattered amongst the nations. If you read on from verse 19 all the way to verse 21, listen to what Yah says through Ezekiel. See, I am taking the children of Israel, all 12 tribes, from among the nations, the Gentiles, wherever they have gone, and shall gather them from all around, and I shall bring them into their land. And I shall make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel. Remember, what's the promise? What's the faith? A kingdom is the faith. Not hanging out on a cloud, playing a harp, all the rest of that stuff. The kingdom is the hope. Through resurrection, the kingdom is the hope. So here, I'm going to make them one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel, and one sovereign, one king shall be sovereign over them all. And let them no longer be two nations, and let them no longer be divided into two kingdoms. Go on down to verse 24 and listen. And this is, you can see this is exactly what Yeshua is speaking about, these two different sheepfolds. And David, my servant, Yeshua, the son of David, is king over them, or a sovereign over them. And they shall all have one shepherd. And here's the real important part. And they will all walk in my right rulings and guard my Torah, and shall do them. Guys, this is so important that we realize this plan, this ultimate end, this kingdom through resurrection. There's only one plan. There's only one plan for God's people. Gentile and Jew. There's only one plan. Northern house and southern house. There is no separate plan for what we call the Gentile church today. It just does not exist. That is something that we have made up over time. There is only one plan. Now, I know you'll hear a lot today when you talk about prophecy teachers. They'll tell you about, well, there's a plan that God has for the Gentile church, and once he's done that and he kind of deals with her and removes her away, then he's going to deal with the Jew again. That is not what the Torah teaches. That's not what Yeshua taught. That is not what Ezekiel, that's not what Daniel, that's not what any of them taught. There is one plan. There is one kingdom, and all peoples will be made part of that one kingdom through resurrection to live physically on this earth with access to New Jerusalem on this earth in a true and real kingdom. To be kind of politically correct, or I guess the word is woke today, what we have today is Gentile supremacy. I know we hear a whole lot about the supremacy this and supremacy that. Well, what has happened is because of the animosity in between Jew and Gentile, even in the early stages, the first and second generation, or the second century into the third century, that hatred continued. And many Gentiles pushed themselves away from the Jews, as did Jews, I'm sure, pushed themselves away from Gentiles. But the church became Gentile at some point. And again, to use a woke term, they became Gentile supremacists. And they took over everything. But without the Jew, they lost the core. That's why it's to the Jew first. That's why it's to Shaul. That's why he's a student of Gamaliel. That's why it's to the apostles. They were Jews first. They knew things that the Gentiles had no idea of, and they needed to relearn and re-understand. And unfortunately, with Gentile supremacy, with the supremacy of the Greek scriptures, or Greek supremacy, I guess you could call it as well, well, we've come to where we are today thinking that there's multiple plans, one for a Gentile church and another for the house of Israel, the house of Judah. Guys, there is one plan, just one plan for all the people of God. There has always ever been one plan for all peoples from the day that this faith was given to Abraham. So real important part. The kingdom is the hope. I see somebody put it down there. Oh, Pastor G, the kingdom is the hope. Exactly. Okay, so we are citizens of that kingdom, or we should be citizens of that kingdom. Verse 17. Now we're going all the way back to where we just were in Romans. So all of that just to kind of explain why he says to the Jew first and also to the Gentile. So now we've got some context to understand that this is not an arbitrary statement, but this is a very pointed, very real topic that he is bringing up, that he's going to bring up again and again. So, to the Jew first, but also to the Gentile. That's verse 16. Verse 17 then says, "For in it the righteousness of Elohim is revealed from belief to belief or from faith to faith, as it has been written, but the righteous shall live by faith. Another verse that is kind of very, very much misunderstood. What does it mean that the righteous shall live by faith, or that this is being revealed from belief to belief? You got to understand, he just finished telling us to the Jew first and to the Gentile, who are in the world around them at odds with each other and will be from that point on, and will divide everything. What he's telling us, faith, the Shema, belief. And I'm giving you on the notes there sort of my translation of it. Faith, to believe in Yeshua's sacrifice, giving us righteousness, or giving us a right standing with Elohim. In other words, making us clean to approach. Once that happens, there still needs to be faith now to live that righteousness. This thing given to the Jew first and to the Gentile is by faith to begin, and it is by faith to continue. And those who are righteous, those who are made right in right standing with Yah, those who have been clean and are allowed to approach, as it is written, the just shall live by faith, those justified before Yah live righteously. You know, we use, again, I don't want to get too much into what the word salvation means today, but we use that word all the time. I'm saved, I'm saved, I'm saved, I'm saved. No, we are justified. That means we have been made clean to approach our God. We have been forgiven. We have had the blood sacrifice wash our sin. We are now in a place of righteousness. We are in a right standing with Yah. But what you do with that standing matters. If you are in a right standing with Yah and you continue to walk in unrighteousness, your right standing with Yah will be gone. But if you are in right standing with Yah by faith, because it's from faith to faith, you are in right standing with Yah by faith. Now by faith, we must continue to walk in righteousness, because those who are righteous shall live by faith. And the context of what he's talking about comes from Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. That's what he's quoting when he says, the righteous shall live by faith. Anytime Paul quotes something, we've got to go back to the Hebrew source of it to find out what's exactly being said. Because again, this isn't fortune cookie scriptures here. This isn't just throwing things out there that sound good or help make his point. He's using these scriptures because his point is about that scripture. So if you understand it in its context, you'll understand better what he's saying, why he's saying the righteous shall live by faith. Again, the context is Habakkuk chapter 2 and verses 1 through 5. And what he's going to tell us, the summary is going to be, is that nothing can be accomplished by our own means, whether you are Jew or you are Gentile, to the Jew first or to the Gentile. Because here's the context of Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. Now, the whole context of the book is he's talking about Babylon that is going to be used in judgment. Babylon is destroying all the nations around her, and she's going to be used in judgment against Israel. But Babylon does not rely on Yah at all, could care less about the God of the Jews, and they have no faith. They are reliant upon themselves. They are self-reliant. The righteous, however, in Yah are not self-reliant for their picture. They are God for their place. They are God reliant for their righteousness, for their standing. So that's the context, and let's listen to what he says. Chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. I stand at my watch and station myself on the watchtower, and I wait to see what he says to me and what to answer when I am reproved. And Yehovah answered me and said, write the vision and inscribe it on tablets, so that he who reads it runs. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, and it speaks of the end, and it does not lie. If it lingers, wait for it shall certainly come. It shall not delay. See, He whose being is not upright in him is puffed up. He's speaking about the Babylonians and also about the Jews of his own day who are puffed up in themselves, but not in faith. They do not stand by faith. They stand by their own righteousness or their own concepts and ideas. As opposed to that, let's read the red again. See whose being is not upright in him is puffed up. But the righteous ones live by faith, steadfastness. And also, because wine betrays him, a man is proud, and he does not stay at home, because he enlarges his appetite as the grave, and he is like death, and is not satisfied, and gathers to himself all nations, and heaps up for himself all peoples, like the Babylonians who are coming. So what's the context of all of this? He is comparing those who through their own efforts think they may be right, but really they're puffed up and unrighteous. But those who have done nothing but believe in Yah, and because of that live righteously on what Yah has done, the righteous one lives by faith. That's the context that Rabbi Shaul is using back in verse 17. So what is he actually saying then? To the Jew first and to the Gentile, to both of them, we do not stand on our own. We come by faith. The faith makes us righteous. We then live by faith, and we live righteously in him. That's what it means. To both. In other words, it's no different. And God understand this is revolutionary to the people of that day. It's no different for the Jew as it is for the Gentile. Both stand by faith. Both must live righteously. Both have to stand by what Yah has done, not on their own. Then it gets us into verse 18. And I got just a couple of minutes left, so I'm not going to get all too far into this. We'll just read it through, and then we'll come back next week and we'll take a look at it. So from verse 18 on, he's now going to tell us what it looks like for those who do not stand by faith, for those that do not, that are not faithful and do not live righteously. What happens to mankind when they do that? For the wrath of Elohim is revealed from heaven against all wickedness and unrighteousness of men. Let me stop there just for a second, because I realize there's no way I'm going to get through all of this, but I want to comment on that point before we go any further. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all wickedness and unrighteousness of men, who suppress the truth and unrighteousness, because that which is known of Elohim is manifest among them, for Elohim has manifested it to them. I get people that ask me all the time, are the pygmies, they haven't heard the gospel, are they accountable? Everybody is accountable. All men of every generation that have ever lived, whether they have whether they received the Torah, knew the Torah or not, doesn't matter. This is what this is going to tell us, is that Yah has, through nature, Yah has, in our own spirit, shown us what is right and what is wrong. We should all know to murder is wrong. We should all know to lie is wrong. We should all know adultery is wrong. We should all know stealing is wrong. Those are things that is a natural Torah that is within us. We should know that homosexuality and lesbianism, those are not things that produce life. They are incorrect. Those are things that are in us. But without faith, without understanding, we then allow all of those things to come in, and all men are accountable for that. So there are those who are accountable without the Torah, that don't know the Torah, and there are those that are accountable because they have the Torah, to the Jew first, and also to the Gentile. So I just want to end with this, because I'm not going to be able to get into this too much at all, really, but I want you to understand this. Who's accountable for this? Everybody. Every person, everywhere, whether they have heard this or not, and who made us accountable? Elohim has manifested it to mankind, to all of us. We are all accountable, whether you hear that Yeshua is Lord or not. Now, I think in our day and time, that's practically the entire globe has heard it, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The information God has already given to us in nature, looking up at the stars, seeing the world that we live in, the beauty of it. God will judge each man according to that knowledge that he knows and how he lives a Torah in his heart based upon what he does know. And now, once we have Yah's word, that makes us even more accountable. And we'll find that out next week as we go through verses 18 on. I really wanted to try to get through all of this, but there's so much information here. We're going to stop right here for today. Got so much more to cover, but I hope that's interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed that, understanding why it is for the Jew first. It's not by accident. It is by design, and it takes us all the way from the Torah, all the way to Daniel, all the way to the book of Acts, all the way to the book of Revelation, which is exactly the way we're supposed to do it. Make that plumb line from one end all the way to the other. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget, we're counting the Omer. Check us out tomorrow morning for Morning Manna. And have a great day tonight, great night tonight, a great day tomorrow. Join us this weekend. We got some really interesting stuff to talk about in Hidden Manna. You'll enjoy it. It's kind of fun, a little bit a not so serious topic. We've kind of gone over a whole bunch of serious stuff. We're going to go a little bit different direction this week, but I think you'll enjoy it. Outside of that, guys, thanks for joining me tonight. Have a great night. God bless. And as always, guys, shalom.